2019 Lexus NX 300H. This is a hybrid, and I'm about to perform a nitrogen purge. This is a high voltage 3-phase electric compressor on here, as indicated by the orange wires. Most everybody in automotive should know this, but any do-it-yourselfer still might be catching up on this information. So this is going down to your compressor, and this is POE oil, and this is a special POE oil. This is a POE oil that is very, very dry and very dielectric, meaning it does not conduct electricity because this is a high voltage compressor. And one thing you want to keep out there, out of the lines when you're going to take it apart, is you do not, absolutely do not want atmospheric air going in there. It literally will travel from the end of the hoses or lines where you disconnect it, and the moisture will attach to the molecules of refrigerant oil that are coating the lines, and literally capillary, like when you take a corner, say this was a sponge, and if you took a sponge and you dipped it into some water just at the corner, it was a dry sponge, you ever notice a few hours later that the moisture has traveled up the sponge several inches to a point where it could evaporate more than it can actually keep a capillary action going and keep traveling? Well, what will happen is when you leave your lines open to the atmosphere, the moisture in the atmosphere will touch the POE oil that's coating the refrigerant lines and literally keep on traveling back in a capillary action, clinging to the molecules of POE oil, carrying itself backwards up the system, all the way back to the furthest regions, even all the way back to a rear evaporator if you have one, literally saturating the oil with moisture from the air. And this is another thing. People go, well, how can it get way back there, and how does moisture keep going into the system? Do you remember in roughly 3rd grade to 5th grade science class when the teacher took a glass, a bottle, a vessel, and turned it upside down inside of a pan of water? And if you heated the glass, it would expand the air inside the glass, and you would see the bubbles come out from underneath the bubble in the water. And then if you let the glass bottle cool, as that air shrank inside, it would literally pull the water up inside the glass vessel and become higher than the level of water that was out here in the atmosphere. The exact same thing happens every night on a vehicle that has POE oil, where you leave the lines open to the air, and it's in the shop at nighttime, and the temperatures drop to 40 degrees, 50 degrees, like it's here in San Francisco. The air inside the lines, the refrigerant inside the evaporator, dual evaporator if you have one, gets cold. And in some places it gets down to 30 degrees, 20 degrees at nighttime. So that air shrinks and it pulls back from the openings. While it's shrinking and contracting, it's literally grabbing outside air and sucking wet outside air into the system. Then the next day when it warms up, and say like here right now it's 75 degrees, starting from 50 degrees where it was last night, the air inside all these tubes and lines, compressor and evaporate, expand. And so it shoots the air out very slowly through your openings while you're working over the car during the course of many days. And while that is happening, more air is coming out as the air temperature inside the shop raises. And then it repeats again. The shop air temperature lowers at night, say down to 40 degrees, and it contracts and it sucks more moist air into the system, contaminating the POE oil, and it repeats that process. And no, you're not going to get it all out with doing a vacuum. You can reduce it, and the majority you use have the big dumb machines that just have a vacuum pump in it. It really doesn't get it down to that grade of level for an extended period of time, especially the guys who want to do it fast and say, oh, I hit 29, I stop right there and I charge it up. That's like worst case scenario. And in this case, it's an electric compressor with POE oil, what's even more sensitive to moisture, and over time it causes damage. So as you can see, I have this, okay, let's turn it on. And what I'm checking for is how much I got out. I was down to 800 microns. I have dropped to 18 inches of mercury vacuum, which is acceptable under the EPA rules, but I like to get it all out if I can. So let's start it up here, recover a little bit more out. I'm about to hook it up to nitrogen and purge the system with nitrogen. So you can see we're all the way down to the micron level again. So here we go. We're going to do the micron purge. Let's get that over to self-purge so I can fill up the tank and get rid of any liquid out of here. So now I'm showing you a procedure without using a vacuum pump. Many of you guys in shops will have a vacuum pump hooked up to your third line, and you can literally vacuum out this refrigerant line right here using a vacuum pump. You would have this all on a rig, on a bench, on a table, on a tray, on a dolly, a hand truck, a cart, whatever your method is you would use. You can literally dry this out and purge it, clean it out using your vacuum pump that would always be hooked up. You would never take it apart like me if you're in a shop, if you didn't want to. So let's get, there we go. We got a little blast of nitrogen in there. So now my nitrogen is under positive pressure in this refrigerant line. Now you see we're still in a vacuum. We're all the way down into the micron level here, down to 895 microns. So now I'm going to close off the low side because I'm going to purge this dry nitrogen through the high side and flush it through the liquid line here. It'll hit the expansion valve. The dry nitrogen will go through the expansion valve, flush and push all the way through the core, come back up the suction line, come up to the low side, and we will read that right here. So let's open it. There we go. We got a positive pressure of 6, and it's coming up over here. It's a positive pressure of 4. That's all I gotta do. I'm done. That's all you had to do. And if you were in a shop, you would have a nitrogen tank permanently hooked up to your cart, your tray, whatever mobile device you develop inside your shop method. All this stuff would be all the time, full 100%, always hooked up to each other. I had a custom set of gauges where I actually drilled and I tapped into the manifold port where I had a 5th hose going to a set of gauges, and I even had another one going to where I used to have a oil suction on the side where I would open up another one and it would suck oil in, and then I'd close it off and then use pressure to push it in. I had a very elaborate system many years ago I used to use, but now there's just too many year, make, model vehicles with too many different kinds of oils for me to have dedicated systems with each dedicated oil for every set of manifolds. It's just gotten ridiculous. But we're done. That's it. So now I can close off this right here, and I now have dry nitrogen trapped inside my gauges and my hoses, and I'm ready for the next vehicle. And I could disconnect, and there's roughly 3-4 psi of dry nitrogen in the system. So when the technician comes over and disconnects those lines right there, he has the tape that he puts over the ends, or he puts the rubber plugs or vacuum plugs inside the ends, and he seals off the ends the best he can while he's doing all the work. And that's it. That was really simple. All right, guys, I'll see you.